I will be discussing nutrition for our session today. And these are the major requirements of our dairy cattle. We have to fill in their energy, and this is very important in terms of their body condition. Um, you will encounter the terms positive energy balance and negative energy balance later on as you do more reading outside of what we are going to discuss for our meeting today. And it's very important for dairy cattle to have positive energy balance, especially after their calving, because it will dictate how soon they can go into heat after the calving and how much milk production that they're going to give you for as they have given birth. The protein is very important for the milk production, for the quality of the milk, and also for their musculoskeletal system. The fats and the oils are also important for the fat content of the milk, and it should be as rich as it can be because we are also using their milk for cream and ice cream, no? And you will learn more about that or have already learned about it after reviewing your handouts for the milk byproducts. The minerals are very important in terms of ensuring that they will not have any metabolic disorders, no, such as hypoglycemia, hypocalcemia, ketosis, no? Same as with the vitamins for their fertility, for their coat quality, and the water which composes like 90% of the milk that they're going to produce. So these are your major nutritive requirements on a daily basis for our dairy cattle. And this can be supplied by roughage alone. Okay? Let me emphasize, no, this can be supplied by roughage alone, provided that you are giving high quality forage. No? And I've seen it, I've witnessed it, how New Zealand are feeding their dairy cattle without any concentrates, and still they are producing 60 kilograms per day. No, they're very good milkers. Unfortunately, here in the Philippines, we are not lucky or like blessed enough, no, to have this very good quality roughages because of our tropical climate, because of our quality of our soil. So we cannot feed them with roughages alone, and we have to supplement them with concentrates if you really want to get as much milk or as high milk production from our dairy cattle. For certain times, like since we have the wet season and the dry season, so when we are in the dry season and that our area is not irrigated, it will be difficult for us to supply these fresh forages, no? Because we don't have water supply to irrigate our lands or to water our lands so that we will have this pasture all year round. That's why we can revert to feeding our cattle with silage, no? And for sustainability purposes, meaning so that you can afford to feed your animals, no, silage, it would be very good to just depend on silage as an alternate feed, no, alternate roughage, and not to really depend on it solely. It will be very expensive in your operations. Okay. Then the last one would be any crop residue or hay or straw. So this would be like forage that had undergone a certain process. So let's say drying. So that would be hay. So from the rice straw, you can also dry it up and fortify it with urea. Later on, you will know more about that to increase the protein content, the quality of the straw, no? Because in itself, just hay and straw, the quality of the protein is already very low. And we just give the hay for the animals that have low nutrient requirements, meaning as when they are not milking. So you don't have to feed them as much of the nutrients because you're not getting any milk from them anymore. Okay, so if you're going to give the hay and the straw, you cannot expect much on the output coming from the cow because this would just be maintenance type of forages. But if you want, because if you have a lot of this, you can fortify it by adding mixing urea with it so that you can increase the quality of this hay and straw. Okay, crop residues may be sugarcane tops, no? So it well some farmers wouldn't have access to this sugarcane tops, so they would use other crop residue such as the stalks of corn um and so forth, no? So it depends upon the condition of the farm and which types of crop residues and forage byproducts that you can get hold of. Ideally, that because I already mentioned that, so we have to have our own land, okay? Because it will not be sustainable, it will not be efficient, it will not be enough, it will not be sufficient for you to keep on traveling wherever just to get the grass for your animals. Ideally, you really have to have area so that you can pasture your dairy cattle, so it will have less cost for your operations. You have to consider the type of the land that you have. So always, and it's a part of the job that I used to do, is to survey the land where we have to plant our forages. I have to get soil and send it to the laboratory for soil analysis. And so we have to adjust on the fertilization of the land depending on the requirements that's lacking in the land, and also identify which forages would be properly would properly grow in the chosen location, in chosen land, such as if it's waterlogged, so there are just certain forages that can live in waterlogged areas. If it's too dry, which would be the preferred forage species that we can plant there. So you will learn it after the reading break. Okay, so pasture propagation would mean fertilization, whether it be the organic one, that would be the ruminant feces, or if you would revert to commercial fertilizers, no, such as urea, and then you have your NPK. No, you will learn that in the succeeding slides. And lastly, depending on the size of your land, no, if you can do rotational grazing all throughout for all of your animals, that would be the best way to do it, no, because it will give you really a lot of savings, less cost in maintaining your herd, no. So you have to have enough pasture land so that you can practice 100% rotation. Ideally, the land that you're going to choose would be already fertile. It's not waterlogged, slightly elevated, so that the drainage would be very good. And you have a water source, no? So that even if on the dry season, you will not have a problem with the growth of your forages. You can easily water them down, okay? And in some areas where you have a plantation of coconuts, so you can still plant underneath coconuts. So at least you can maximize, no, your land by having these two crops. You have your forage for your cattle, and then you still have your coconuts. The species that you have to look for would be the ones that would be high yielding. They are with high crude protein. They are palatable because there are also some trade-offs, and you will learn it later on, that it could be like a plant, let's say Madre de Cacao. It has a very high crude protein, but it's not that palatable because it's bitter, no? So there are some trade-offs. So you have to look into the better way is for you to have a variety, but not too many. Let's say just 3 so that you can have a mix, no, of the one that's palatable but of a lesser crude protein with the one that's less palatable and with a high crude protein. Okay, so at least you can have like maximize both potential of these forage species. And together with the pasture management that you're gonna do, that trying to manage the weed, and that is removing the weeds manually and ensuring that your planted forages would really establish a good root system below in the soil, and that so that it can compete with the weeds, no? And ideally, this would just be accidents, but the better way to do your planting is to fencing them so that no one would pass through the vehicles and people and even cattle, no? But more importantly, even if you already have this established pasture lot, the forage species that you should have planted would be less, no? Would can withstand trampling by the dairy cattle that are grazing in your pasture lot. Okay. And those that would not require a lot of sunlight, no, just enough. No. So these are the many characteristics that you have to consider. It's difficult to find all of these in one forage species, so you have to really study it over with the soil analysis that you have, which would be the best one in your area. So we have recommended grasses such as the Mombasa, Mulato. These are hybrid grasses coming from Thailand that we have already been that we have access since for over a decade now. But this has not been planted all over the Philippines yet. No, only a few areas still have this. So we want to educate the farmers to use these recommended grasses instead of the popular Napier grass, no? So for Mombasa and Mulato, these have higher crude protein and they're also palatable. They do not have the stalks where we can see with the Napier plant that if they have outgrown their optimum age, no, the stalk would harden. It would be less palatable now for our ruminants, no? So with Mombasa and Mulato, they grow up to the knee lengths and are sweet, and the animals love them, and we have high crude protein. Grass is something that we can plant on waterlogged areas. So with the farm I used to work for, we have a very problematic area, and we just decided rather than after several planting it with the Mombasa or Mulato, we just decided to let it be because it's difficult for us to adjust the drainage. So we just planted paragrass with it instead. Okay, same with Baspalum atratum, Esplenda acetaria. So the last two bullets were famous before the arrival of Mombasa and Mulato too. And they look the same, no, because they don't have stalks as well. And they would only grow up to knee length, differ on the blade, on the size of the blade, and also the crude protein. These are your recommended legumes that we have. Popularly, we have indigenous, centrosima, ipil-ipil, and then Madre de Cacao. The others, Townsville stylo and Scofield stylo, were introduced to us. And these are propagated through seeds. Okay. There's someone who's raising her hand. Yes, do you have a question?
For yung grass, why is it better for them to not require a lot of sunlight kung very sunny ang Philippines?
Okay. There may be well, depending on your area, when it's too sunny, it could lead to yellowing of the leaves. So you can regulate that. If you are in that area, you can regulate it with planting tree legumes on the side so that it could provide a little shade to the grass. And you can also adjust it with the water provision in the pasture area so that at least they would not be that dehydrated. So same as how it goes with humans and animals, no? Not to suffer from heat stress. So you regulate it with drinking a lot of water, something like that. And find and also finding some shelter. So it could lead to yellowing. Okay, going forward, cilantro is also a vine legume, and it also has high crude protein, but it's not as indigenous here as compared to centrosima. And as mentioned earlier, Maji de Cacao is very good. This is a tree legume, but we have an issue on the palatability. These are some examples of legumes that were introduced to us. We are very familiar with makahiya, but not with makahiyang lalaki. So the difference on these two is our own makahiya has thorns, so they're not we don't chew them up. No, our animals don't chew them up. But with makahiyang lalaki, they look like our makahiya, but without the thorns, and then the leaf blades are bigger. Okay, so this is an introduced legume. So this is a shrub legume. We have three types of legumes. We have the vine legume, the shrub legume, and then the tree legume. Okay, I've already given you examples for each tree. Okay, this is the butterfly pea, and we see several of these probably in the provinces. And we use the flower actually as decoration, a garnish, no, for food, and we can also use it as tea. And the flower and the leaves are very good in feeding our ruminants. No, they also have high food protein. Another introduced one is the cilantro. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. The layman's term is the burgundy bean. We may see this in some areas, I mean, in the provinces as well. They propagate through the seeds, okay? When they mature, these flowers, no, you have these pea pods, and then they will open up and then spread the leaves, and also to the birds and then the bees, no? That's how they would spread out these cilantro. Same as with centrosima, they are very good in terms of crude protein. So if we have this in the farm, we usually intermix it with our forages. But in my experience, it's easier to propagate the centrosima because they're everywhere here in the Philippines as compared to cilantro. Okay, another introduced legume is the erect forage peanut. The common peanut that we have actually is the Arachis pintoy, which has smaller leaf blades and has a yellow color of its flower. But for the erect forage peanut, it doesn't have any flower, and they're giant, no, compared to the peanut grass that we usually have. Okay, another example is a shrub legume, which is our desmodium. Sometimes we see them, these are endemic, but we don't see them a lot anymore. And we can also use this, no, to increase the protein in the diet of the animals. As mentioned earlier, it would be best to have a mix of the grass and legume in our pasture. And these are examples that you can do. But you can also, like do other pairings, no? These are the ones that we have done before. So we have the stylo, which is shrub legume intermixed with the guinea grass. So we also have centrosima, which is a vine legume intermixed in the napier, because the napier goes, diba? It can go tall. So it will climb up. No, the vine legume would climb up. And then the paragrass, together with the stylo, they're both like shrubs. And then we have the centro together with stylo as well. So I have pictures here to show you an intermix. So this is the Arachis pintoi, or the peanut plant that I was mentioning earlier, which has the yellow color of its flower. So it's just a shrub legume. So it spreads horizontally. So you can intermix it with this signal grass, no? Another one would be this, this would be actually three combinations. The star-like leaf blades, or the ayapenta, like the marijuana leaf blade. So that would be your stylo. But I know they're not actually five leaf blades. It's actually six. It looks like a star. But they would be a lot smaller, maybe 1/3 the size of a leaf blade of marijuana. So it's very small lang. And then you have these Arachis pintoi leaves on this other side, propagated in this pasture of signal. Another combination would be this mulatto grass and this Arachis pintoi, or the peanut grass. And another picture of the same pairing. And then on this one, we have mulatto 2 grass with your butterfly pea or your cilantro, which is another vine legume, having a much bigger leaf blade compared to your centrosip. Okay. Going forward on our pasture propagation, we have to consider if what we're gonna is to plant grass only or legume only, but like recommended, it would be better to have the mixed grass and legume. So we have to prepare the land thoroughly, and I'm going over the slides on the housing and equipment. I've shown you several of the agricultural implements that we have to be familiar with if we're really working in a dairy cattle farm or any cattle farm. As part of the pasture propagation process, we have to harrow, we have to plow, no, we have the weeders, no, and those are the many things that would help get rid of the weeds and enable the forages that we have planted to really grow and establish its root system. We also have to plan, no, the planting of our forages to be at the start of the rainy season. Fortunately, the farm I work for, we have irrigated land, so we don't we were not limited with the rainy season. But for most of the farms, this is a major concern, no? Really, we really time it as when we have the start of the rainy season. You also have to consider what type of planting materials that you have to prepare. So for Napier, it has to be stalks. For the rest, no, I mentioned like for some of the legumes, for most of the legumes, it's actually through seeds, okay? But for the some grasses, let's say paragrass, it's cuttings, it's for mulatto, you can use cuttings. Actually, Mombasa also cuttings. But at the start, we would be using seeds, no, to establish our plant bank. Okay. There's also science behind planting the seeds with the proper depths. Okay, and so that the birds will not eat them, and ants won't eat them, pests won't eat them, no? So they will not be wasted and they will thrive. Okay. And next, in terms of fertilizer, the complete one, that's the NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And the amount, no, the standard amount that we have to give per hectare is 400 kilograms. And honestly, that's expensive. We really have to be serious in our pasture propagation, and this would be the future of our herd if we do it properly. Okay, so if you have a problem with just the phosphorus according to your soil analysis, so this would also be a standard no amount that you have to give, you have to provide in your pasture. But in the soil analysis, We can also have the help of the agriculturists and agronomists. They would be the ones to compute how much of each of the fertilizers that we would need according to the soil analysis results. Okay, lime. This can help in the mineral supplementation of the soil, and same as with potassium. So we can also use organic material fertilizer such as the dried. No, it has to be dried first, dried manure of our cattle. It's possible to go organic all the way in terms of the fertilization, but you will require a lot of dried manure to get rid of buying these commercial fertilizers. It's possible, but it can be a challenge. Okay, on the grazing management, we can do about 60% grazing, and ideally the basic recovery is every 21 days. And if we have a lot of pasture lots, it would be better to have it longer. That's why you have a range of up to 60 days. But the reason why we want it to be at 21 days, that is also to disrupt the life cycle of the parasites. Okay, and that is the lowest or like the usual life cycle that we encounter, 21 days. But I like as a ball figure, we can round it up to 30 days. Okay. A continuous grazing, this would mean you are not really letting your animals go out, because extensive operations would mean sorry, let me correct that. Continuous grazing is allowing your animals to go out and graze all throughout, because extensive meaning they're just outside most of the time, no? As compared to intensive, wherein you're the ones getting the food and deliver it to your in front of your animal. So we commonly use this with native animals because they are small, and then this is the usual setup with the smallhold farmers, that they don't have their own land and they herd, and then they transfer from one area to another, and it's mostly unimproved areas, locations, no? So these are just like weeds and not high quality grasses that they have access to. The zero grazing is the intensive operations wherein we have we get the forage and deliver to the in front of the animal. And this can be feasible for operations with few animals. You can also do this with bigger operations, but it will require a lot of forage area for you to do, for you to have this enough supply. Okay. Okay, going forward, let's proceed to the silage. There are many materials that we can use. The common that we have would be the corn silage, and that would be chopping the whole plant plus or minus the cobs. Okay, and we do not let the corn really grow to maturity when we have the big corn cobs. The forage corn, which is the one we use for the silage, would not really have big corn cobs. They would be just mature, and that would be the time where we harvest them and chop them up. Okay, another one would be corn stover itself. No, corn stover is the stalk. Okay, and we can maximize after harvesting the corn that we consume for human, and rather than throw the corn stover, we can use it for the animals, and store it as silage. The other alternative for the corn would be the sorghum, which is on the picture here. So instead of the corn cobs, you have this seeds on top, and this would also be the means to plant this sorghum going forward. Okay, so that would be the sorghum. We have a few of these already here, but in some parts of the world, they grow sorghum second to corn. As mentioned earlier, as a crop residue, some farms with sugar canes can have access to the sugar cane tops, rather than sell them, rather than throw them away. We can also feed them as fresh, and we can also silage them. In Thailand, it's very famous that they also use the tapioca leaves or cassava leaves. They feed them fresh, they dry them, or they sile them. And not very popular, but some are doing it. We also have some Napier silage available, but it's mostly like if you're going to do a lot of effort, spend a lot of inputs on doing a silage, it's better to do it with the corn rather than with the Napier. And lastly, we have these crop residues. So for calves, they can promote the early development of rumen. So that's basically the reason why we're giving these grasses, this hay or straw, or this clean, not of a very high value forage. And the calves are not getting so much of the nutrients from this, but this is only to start their rumen development. Okay. For mature cattle that are not lactating, we use the hay and straw as their maintenance feed. And this is when they are on the dry period. That's when they're not milking. And still, this must be supplemented because we're not getting so much from this type of forage. So we have to provide either concentrates if that's in the Philippines, or we fortify it with a supplement. We add on powder concentrates. Okay. Going forward on the concentrates, this would be a big chunk on your cost, on the feed cost, because this would be expensive, and farmers parse it out. Okay, and we can buy the commercial pellets or commercial mash, the powder form, or we can have separate raw materials and mix it ourselves. Okay. So now you will learn what type of raw material does it belong to, if it's an energy source, a protein source, or a vitamin mineral. Okay. The raw materials that we can use as source for our energy would be the high starch ones, okay, with total adjustments of 60 to 80%. So this just means that in like 100 kilograms of certain raw material that you have provided the animal, 80% will be digested, and 20% will be, just go out in the part of the feces of the animal. So you can choose among these eight listed materials, or raw materials. These are the common ones that we use. The very popular one would be the corn. And then the corn bran would be a byproduct of processing of the yellow corn. And we are using this aside from as an energy concentrate. It would be a good source for the phosphorus. Okay, the sorghum also is an energy concentrate raw material, same as with cassava. And then rice bran, it's both as a source of phosphorus and also as an energy source raw material. For the protein, the ideal one is to have about 20%, no? But the more expensive one would be at the very high of 60%. So that would be the soybean, and we import it from usually the United States, also from Argentina. We can also get it from Europe, okay? And since we're importing this would be very expensive. And we can buy this as a raw material, and then we mix it with other proteins, energy source, such as with the corn. And it's like making our own commercial feeds, no? But for our own use. No? So it's like we're customizing for our own use. The copper coconut meal is something that we have here in the Philippines because we have a lot of coconuts. And what we like about this copra is it can be both actually a protein and an energy concentrate. So it's like dual purpose. That's why in most of the feeds in the Philippines, we really utilize copra. It's part of the mix of the commercial ones that we have, okay? And another protein source would be the corn gluten feed meal. So the corn meal, it's also dual purpose. It can be a protein and an energy concentrate. Same as with rice bran and corn bran. Okay, and leaf meals, this just means your legumes, okay? So both the copra and the corn are dual purpose, but one is higher than the other. So let's say for the corn, it has higher energy as compared to the protein. That's why it was categorized under the energy concentrate. For the copra, it has a higher protein than for the energy. So that's why it's listed here rather than the previous slide. Okay, moreover, we also have fish meal. This is very good actually. We can get it from China, USA, Argentina as well. But the thing is, it gives us a fishy odor and it can be problematic with your milk. Okay, especially if you're if you're selling it out, no? But it's a lot cheaper than your soybean meal. And so you will, have less feed costs if you use fish meal, which has also higher crude protein. But yeah, you may have problem with the odor of the milk. Meat and bone meal, this can give you high protein, but because of mad cow disease, we do not recommend giving this to ruminants, no, because they have a concern on the mad cow disease. They are prone to that. Okay, skim milk, this could be for our calves, no? High protein, definitely, and that's the stage that they will need a lot of protein as well. So the feather meal, we can get it locally, no? We just gather all the feathers coming from all the poultry, etc. And then there's a machine or like a processing plant that can make the feathers, pulverize them, and make feather meal, no? So it also has a characteristic odor, so that may be a concern with the milk that you're producing. But this can be really relatively cheap because most of the poultry processing plants here would pay for throwing the feathers, and then you're gonna get it for free. So they would be happy to give it to you, no? Or if they would sell it very, very minimal cost. Okay, we would not advise on chicken manure because of the possible bacteria that it can have. But of course, you don't really give it raw. There's also a processing method that it has to go through so that it will undergo heat. So some of the bacteria will be killed and then it will be pulverized. Going on the vitamin and mineral supplementation, we have this salt blocks where we can buy them commercially or we can do it on our own. And we can also provide powder such as a ground limestone or oyster shell, but the oyster shell would be just really more expensive. So we recommend the farmers to give the ground limestone, which is also the agricultural lime that was mentioned earlier. So this is a very good and cheap source of calcium. And animals, no, dairy cattle really need this on a daily basis as soon as they become breedables, no? Because they're very prone to hypocalcemia because of the milk that they're producing. So this really has to be given as long as they are alive, provided it will be removed 2 weeks before calving, no? Okay. Phosphorus, it has to be on a proper ratio with the calcium, 1:2, no? So that's why we have and sometimes we can also buy dicalcium phosphate, so it's really combination, or we can use the phosphorus coming from the rice bran and then the corn bran, or we can also combine this in itself as a monosodium phosphate. For our vitamins, the fat-soluble ones, ADEC, are the ones that we have to give to our ruminants. They cannot produce it. So it's either together in their feeds as a powder, or we can supplement it as an injectable on a monthly basis. And it's very important to provide this to our pregnant cows and their breeding bulls because this would really help in their fertility. The water-soluble vitamins such as B and C are being produced by the ruminants themselves, no? So for as long as they have become ruminants, they can already produce this coming from their microflora. So it's important for you to also protect the microflora and also to nourish the microflora by giving probiotics and prebiotics, okay? And non-ruminants such as our calves do not produce this yet, so you have to give it to them if they need it, no? And I also provide this even if they are already adults, if they are sick, or if they are, especially if they have disrupted digestion, so they don't have a good microflora to produce this. So we have to supplement this. Okay, our additional non-nutritive additives are antibiotics that we do not routinely give on our animals orally because they will kill the good microflora. Okay, so it may have been given only if there's some scouring, okay, but not on a normal basis. We also do not give hormones, no? It had been an issue in the 1980s, 1990s in the United States that they've been giving growth hormones so that the animals will grow bigger and that they will also be producing a lot more milk. So that has already been banned for several decades. We may give antioxidant to like a toxin binder as well. So it will prevent any problem, stomach upset. Okay, and enzymes, we can do this, no? And this would include the probiotics and then the probiotics to improve the digestibility of our animal. Okay, this has been mentioned many times earlier. This is how we increase the food protein of our hay and straw. We mixed it with urea as a spray, no? Or just a concentrate mix, no? And only up to 1 to 3% of the ration, depending. We have a recommendation in the following slides. It must be mixed thoroughly because if you have any pooling of this urea, and it could lead to urea toxicity. So we have to be very careful with this one. Okay, non-protein nitrogen, because ruminants are very good in converting, okay, in converting nitrogen into protein. That's how they are called ruminants. So we can use this 45% nitrogen or N, okay? And we can convert it so that it will not cause any toxicity. Okay, the UMMB means urea molasses mineral block. This is the recipe given by Philippine Carb Center. And it uses the cement so that it will form as a block. And then the ingredients for the nutrients would be the rice bran, molasses, of course, water so that you can mix all the ingredients, the calcium phosphate, salt, and other trace mineral mix, okay? And this would be our guidelines in urea feeding. You can do it as an addition of, as an inclusion of 1% of the total ration, and you have a computation following that. Or as 2% of the concentrate mixture, because ideally the concentrate part is only 30 to 40%. So only 2% of the 30 to 40%. Okay, so it's less, no? It's less. And or 1/3 of the protein on the ration, okay? Protein of the ration. It would look like it's big, but it's actually not, because the protein is only a small chunk of the entire ration. That's why it can be as high as 1/3 of that small chunk of protein in the ration. Okay. And going forward, we have the several feeding guides. Depending on the physiological status of the animal, it's important for the dairy calves to be given 10% of their body weight every 12 hours. That would be their colostrum, their transitory milk, or the milk formula that you're going to prepare for them. So it's important to weigh your calves upon birth. So you have to have the data of the birth weight so that you will identify and be able to measure how much of the 10% should be given to your animal. So for example, your calf is 30 kilograms birth weight. The calf should be given 3 liters of that milk. Okay? 3 liters in the morning, 3 liters in the afternoon. So that would be a total of 6 liters for that day. It should be warm to the body temperature before feeding. Okay, it should not be cold. Okay, and the calf would undergo the milk feeding up to 8 weeks, and from its 4th week, no, you will start to wean it off with the milk and try to give it with the concentrates. Okay, so here, no, this is just an example of how to do it, but see on the 60th day, and that would be on the 8th week, you are still giving the milk powder or the whole milk, no, if you have that luxury of giving whole milk. And after the 60th day, you will taper the feeding of the milk and try to introduce the concentrate. Going forward, so the concentrate that would be needed by your calves would be with a high food protein of 18%, okay? So it's very high because it's needed for their muscle build-up, growth of the organs, etc., and brain development, okay? And you start the concentrate feeding as soon as possible. And you can actually start instead of 8 weeks, it can be as early as 6 weeks of age. Okay, and you give these concentrates with a high food protein of 18% up to 4 months of age. That would be the optimum one. Okay, and for the forage, you are already starting to train them to be ruminants. So you give it to them every day so that there will be rumen development as soon as possible. And it's free choice, as and when they have finished it up, you can supply a small amount again. Water is always available. The bucket should always be with clean water all the time. Okay, you will be giving supplements of vitamins. This can be top up powder. And on the figure below is an example of their enclosure where they have their buckets on in front of them. That would be the water bucket, and the concentrate bucket, that would be the black one. And behind them would be their grass straw so that they can have access to the forage. Okay, after the 4th month, they will be in a communal housing. We identify them now as growers. So they are being given a lower crude protein concentrate. We call it as the grower concentrates. Okay. And at this time, they can also be allowed outside to graze during daytime. Okay, furthermore, from 6 months and above, as when they become breedables, this will be your growers or grower heifers. They can be let out in the dry land, have their own water, mineral lakes, and concentrate. And for the bulls, from 6 months of age, they will be separated from the females, and they will be grown same as with the growing heifers, and they are being fed the grower concentrates as well. For the pregnant animals, it's important to provide them a good amount of forage up to their last 2 months of pregnancy, and the concentrates would just be on the grower concentrate at 14% CP. What is important is the close-up period, which is 2 weeks before calving, where we remove the calcium supplement and salt, okay? Kasi mas magmama na sila. So it's important na hindi sila mag-take up ng a lot of water in the body so that they will not have any dystocia, they will not be too big. For the dry cows, so these are animals 2 months before the calving date, or as in when they don't have the milk production anymore. So if in the excellent condition, no need for you to give any concentrates, that's high quality forage. But if the body condition is poor, you have to supplement it with concentrates. But you remove the concentrates 2 weeks before calving para hindi nga siya masyadong lumaki. What is needed, what the supplement that's needed is magnesium and not calcium, no? So you provide more of the magnesium 2 weeks before calving and no more calcium. So you can also provide a little bit of salt as a leak only. And last part would be on the milking herd, which will be given again high crude protein concentrates as much as 20%. So it's very similar with that of the calves because they are giving off a lot of milk on a daily basis and a lot less is being left for their body. So we need to replenish it by giving them this high protein concentrates. And we have a rule to give 1 kilogram of concentrate per kilogram of milk being produced. So if the animal is giving you 6 liters of milk, you have to give her 2 kilograms of your milking concentrates. You have to be given a little bit of cool drinking water because after lactating, they would feel very, very thirsty. That's also the same for human lactating moms. So they have to drink water right after they have been milked. And we supplement with the salt, no, so that they would not have any imbalance. Other than that, we can provide high quality forage such as the silage and hay supplemented maybe with urea. This is an example of a mixer. We call this the total mix ration, and these are the advantages that we can get out of using the TMR. And this is an expense for some at first, but going forward, there are many advantages as listed in. So that is how TMR looks like inside when it's working. Okay, and the herd bull will not get as rich crude protein concentrates. Only 14% to 16% is enough. And what's important is they also have this quality forage and then water. They should not be fattened so that it will not there would not be mismatch into your breeding animals. Okay, for your dairy beef, this would be your bulls, okay? That you this would be your bull calves that you're growing out to be sold as meat, okay? So you only give concentrates up to 1% of the body weight. And your forage, it can be low quality, crop residue silages, pineapple pulp, ganyan, as ad libitum because these are just low quality forages and crop residues, no? And you just give a lot of this so that you will not have a lot of feed costs and don't depend much on giving concentrates. What's important, you also give them molasses, no, which is a cheap and source of the vitamins and minerals, and urea, a cheap source of the protein. Another special group would be your veal calves, and these are your calves that you grow out and only feed milk to a certain special market, which is on a steakhouse, etc. So you feed them still the 10% body weight, and up to their market age, which is usually 2 months, you just give them milk their entire lives, okay? And so they will give you a certain quality of the meat, which is pure, because you have not given them any other feeding material rather than the milk. Okay, this is the feed pyramid. So basically, the chunk of what you have to feed other ruminants would be the forages. Next would be the concentrate diets, no, in terms of energy, protein, and then your supplements, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, yan. And the feed additives would be your enzymes, probiotics, prebiotics. Okay, and this would be how you feed your animals according to what you want out of their milk. So what we want is high protein and high fat content. That's for the ideal world. But there can be some trade-offs. So these are some ways on how to troubleshoot if you have problems concerning these parameters in your milk. So this would be a composition of your milk: solid non-fat, protein, lactose, then minerals. TS means total solids, which is equivalent to the fat and the solid non-fat. And the solid non-fat is composed of the protein, lactose, and then the minerals. So if you have analysis of your milk with low fat, so you have to increase on the fiber, and of course increase on the energy or the fat source of your concentrates, etc. Okay, so if you have low solid non-fat, so you have to improve on your protein source, your lactose source, or your minerals, and so forth. Okay, so this is like a cheat sheet, and I always refer to this one whenever I have problems with the quality of the milk. Okay, and for your low fat, you can use buffers, okay, such as your potassium or sodium bicarbonate, magnesium oxide, magnesium carbonate, and so forth, no? Because this can increase the rumen pH and increase the dilution rate of the rumen fluid, okay? Lastly, on the vitamin and mineral content, so minerals are relatively stable, but your vitamins are not. So we have to supply this NPK and sodium chloride, calcium pala, calcium, P, K, and your salt. Okay, trace minerals may be increased by increasing the minerals in the ration. You have your cobalt, your iron, etc. So those are your trace minerals. Okay, if the vitamin content in the milk can be changed depending on the amount of vitamin A, D, E that you're giving off as powder or as injectable. If you need a higher content in the milk, then you will need to increase the provision in the animal, either to the injectable or to the powder form. Okay, the vitamin A will help in the carotene content, okay, by giving off green leafy roughages and also having a lot of pasture, no? So basically increasing the forage content of your feeding. Okay, for vitamin B, for as long as you give your animals pasture, they can get that. And then if they are grazing, they can also get the vitamin from the direct sunlight. If they are off-fed, meaning they have poor appetite, so the volume of the milk will decrease. And because of the decrease in the water, because of the volume, can increase the fat, mineral, and total solids, okay? But, okay, we don't want them to be off-feed all the time because this could mean that they have a disease or a disorder, okay? And that ends our lecture on nutrition. Okay, to further